voice. Is it recording now? I'll say that then. So I thought they would have induced me a week before, but they didn't. And you were supposed to be due, I think, on the 10th or something. Anyway, so it was a planned induction, and I went up to the ward first thing in the morning, probably about 7 o'clock in the morning, and they put me in a room, and the consultant was quite elderly, and he wanted to manage the whole birth because I was doctor's wife and that was how it was. And the nurse that was with him was involved in setting up the induction, where they used syntocinon as a way of causing contractions. And they had this new piece of equipment called a Cardiff pump, which delivered the doses of syntocinon. And he had not used it, and he was reading the instructions from a card and saying, now it says insert into port A, which is port A, and the nurse is rolling her eyes at him and sort of helping him do it and everything. So they got that set up, and it also measured the heart rate of the baby, because you had a strap around your stomach with a monitor on it, which is picking up the heartbeat. And right from the start, the heartbeat was much faster than it should have been. And so they turned it down so I couldn't hear it, thinking that I wouldn't have a clue. But actually I did have a clue. And so that was a little bit worrying, really. So the whole idea of this is it's supposed to bring on your contractions, and it didn't really do very much at all, but it sort of did start to work eventually.
Were you full term then?
I was over a week, 41 weeks. And then at some point during the day, I can't remember when it was, they decided to break my waters, and they took me into theatre to do that. And they were also anxious about the fact that the baby's heart rate was so high. And they put a fetal monitor on the baby's scalp.
You could say my scalp.
Yeah, but it wasn't you at that stage, it was in utero. So although it was you, Laura, it's almost you're detached from the whole process. And when they were doing this, taking this fetal blood sample, it was horrendous. And the guy said something like, oh, I know this is pretty awful for you. And I said, well, it's not really any worse than going to the dentist. And the guy said, oh, I hope the dentist doesn't do this to you. So there's a bit of joke here. Carry on. Anyway, so they put this fetal monitor on, and then they took me back again to wait for this supposed induced delivery. And then they were anxious again about the fact that the baby's heart rate was so high. So I mean, obviously I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. Dad was wandering around looking desperately anxious, and he wasn't supposed to be on call for anything to do with me, but the fact was he was the obstetric houseman, and the other guy was around as well. And then I was visited by a woman consultant who was really kind, and she was the anaesthetist on call. And she came to talk to me, and she said, I think we might have to do a general anaesthetic. And she talked me through it and what the process would be. And I said, well, are you going to do a cesarean? She said, no, I don't think so. And then they called for a doctor who was a GP in the town who did obstetrics in a sort of registrar role, because they needed all hands on deck, because they realised they were going to do a general. And they decided they had to get this baby out because they were anxious about the baby. And they sent for Dr. Terry, who was this GP, but he was out doing visits and they couldn't get hold of him. So in the end, it was literally all hands on deck, and they put me out, and they did a high forceps delivery. And your APGAR score at birth, which is how they judge the condition of the baby, was 7, which isn't brilliant because it's supposed to be 10. And you didn't breathe immediately, and you were full of pethidine and gas and air. I mean, I'd emptied the canisters of gas and air, and at one point I said, you know, you sure there's enough for other people? Which was a bit ridiculous. And so Dad took you. He took you from the nurse, and he got a tube down, and he got you breathing. But I didn't know any of this because I was out, you know, I'd had a general anaesthetic, so I'd no idea what had gone on. And then I came round when this dreadful male elderly consultant was stitching me up. I think I came round then, and Dad was there saying, and he was crying, and he was saying, we've got a little girl. And I hadn't seen you, I didn't know where you were, because they'd whisked you off to wherever they whisk babies off to. And so he wanted me to know first before he phoned anyone. And then he went, and then I was taken to a side ward, so that I had my own room, because they would never let doctors' wives be on the main ward with other mothers, which was pretty good really when you think about it, because he'd probably delivered their babies and they all want to talk about the deliveries and you don't want to hear them talking about the doctors basically. So I was put in this side room, and then they brought the baby to me. But the consequences of this